For over a century, the story of the Americas has begun with a single, unquestioned date, 13,000 years ago, a number carved into our textbooks, echoed through documentaries, and displayed in museums like a sacred boundary between before and after. The tale goes that humanity arrived at the twilight of the Ice Age, crossing a bridge of frozen earth from Siberia into Alaska, armed only with stone tools and the raw hunger to endure. From that late arrival, everything, villages, cities, calendars, even art, was said to have begun. But lately that tidy timeline has begun to fracture. Beneath its surface, a quiet rumbling of evidence stirs. Footprints pressed into ancient mud that predate the supposed first people. Tools buried deeper than they should be. DNA strands whispering of travelers long forgotten. The silence below the timeline is beginning to speak. Picture the Americas 13,000 years ago. Ice still blanketed much of the north, sealing the heart of Canada behind walls of frozen stone. Yet scattered across the continent in Chile's far south, Virginia's forests, Oregon's high plains, traces of human presence have emerged where none should be. How could they have crossed a continent still bound in ice? The question forces us to look again at that sacred line of time. Every civilization builds its own origin myth. For us, it was the Clovis first story, one migration, one beginning. It fit neatly with the fluted spear points discovered near Clovis, New Mexico, dated to roughly 13,000 years before present. For decades, those tools were treated as the first words of our American story. Anything older was dismissed as error. But science, like language, changes when new letters are found. In recent decades, genetics has traced the paths of ancient peoples through fragments of DNA preserved in bones, teeth, and even soil. These genetic maps reveal a more complex journey, multiple waves arriving at different times, some perhaps before the northern ice had even sealed the land. That 13,000-year wall was never stone. It was belief. And what unsettles researchers most isn't just that people may have arrived earlier, it's what that truth implies. If humans walked these lands tens of thousands of years before the supposed dawn, then the roots of civilization itself begin to blur. Cultures we've labeled primitive might be echoes, not beginnings. The great cities of Caral, Tiwanaku, or Teotihuacan could be descendants of older wisdom, not sudden miracles of invention. For generations, archaeologists claimed civilization required agriculture, and that agriculture demanded stability. A stability possible only after the Ice Age thawed. But what if intelligence came first? Adapting, migrating, leaving faint signatures in stone and soil. Across the continent, new excavations are unearthing those traces. Tools shaped 18,000 years ago in Chile. Footprints pressed into wet earth. 23,000 years ago in New Mexico. Signs of minds that gazed upon the same stars we see tonight. Still, for every discovery that stretches the horizon, a chorus of voices insists it must be wrong. To move the timeline means rewriting the story, and stories hold power. Entire careers, institutions, and national identities are anchored to that 13,000-year mark. To question it is to loosen history's moorings. Yet, the current of evidence keeps flowing. Radiocarbon results recalibrated. Genetic clocks retuned. Migration models redrawn. Each adjustment pushes the curtain of prehistory further back into the mist. The silence beneath the timeline grows thinner, more luminous, as though light were seeping through from another age. Perhaps the real mystery isn't when humanity first reached the Americas, but why we chose to stop searching. The date 13,000 years ago became less a fact than a comfort, a border shielding us from uncertainty, but the ground refuses to comply. Beneath layers of accepted history, something older waits, patient, unyielding, asking only to be seen. We begin our descent through that buried quiet, following the earliest signs that cracked the wall. Footprints left in ancient mud, stone fragments older than memory, and the silent question echoing through them all. Who walked here before the world we know began? The story doesn't begin with bones or tools, but with footsteps. Across a dry lakebed in New Mexico, hidden beneath layers of gypsum dust and ancient sediment, hundreds of human prints stretch into the distance, large and small, side by side, as though a group once crossed a muddy plain and vanished into time. When researchers dated the seeds trapped within those layers, the results sent shockwaves through archaeology. Between 21 and 23,000 years old, nearly 10,000 years before the date we've long accepted as humanity's arrival in the Americas. The site, known today as White Sands, preserves more than footprints. It captures a moment in motion. There are signs of children running, adults carrying toddlers, stride patterns that reveal urgency, maybe migration. Beside them, the tracks of mammoths, dire wolves, and giant sloths trace a prehistoric choreography frozen in the earth. It's not myth or speculation, it's the mark of living feet pressed into the past. For years, experts argued over whether those prints could be trusted. Some claimed contamination had distorted the radiocarbon ages. Others suggested the seeds were younger, washed into older layers. Yet repeated testing, from radiocarbon checks on pollen grains to luminescence dating of surrounding sediments, continues to confirm the same result. Humanity was here, in the heart of the Ice Age, when glaciers still gripped the continent. If white sand stood alone, perhaps it could be dismissed. But it doesn't. In Chile's Monteverde, at the continent's far southern edge, archaeologists uncovered the remains of wooden shelters, fire pits, and even seaweed that had been chewed, all dating back at least 18,500 years. That's 5 millennia before the so-called Clovis horizon. Nearby, delicate plant fibers were found, twisted and woven, proof that these people weren't simply surviving, but organizing, crafting, thinking. How could they have reached so far south so early unless they had already been here for thousands of years? Far to the northeast, in Brazil's Pedra Furada, stone fragments buried in deep layers display marks of deliberate shaping. The oldest levels date to 32,000 years, possibly even 48,000 in the most disputed samples. Critics argue the stones shattered naturally, fractured by fire or pressure. But side by side with hearth remains and faint traces of charcoal, the evidence feels less accidental and more intentional. Less chaos, more culture. Across the continent, clues keep surfacing. Isolated artifacts, ancient fire pits, protein residues on buried blades, all found beneath what should be untouched glacial sediment. At the Topper site in South Carolina, thousands of flint chips have been unearthed beneath the familiar Clovis layer, pointing toward tool-making traditions that predate it entirely. Each discovery alone might raise an eyebrow. Together, they form a whisper, a chorus repeating the same phrase, "We were here earlier." And so the question shifts from if to who. Were these early wanderers the ancestors of today's indigenous peoples, or an entirely separate migration erased by time? Genetic studies suggest that the ancestors of Native American populations diverged from East Asian groups roughly 25,000 years ago, aligning eerily with these archaeological finds. Some researchers speak of a Beringian standstill, a long pause in an ice-free refuge before spreading southward. Others imagine early travelers skimming the Pacific coast by boat, following kelp forests and currents, a migration now hidden beneath the ocean's rise. If that's true, then entire chapters of our human story lie drowned beneath the continental shelves, invisible to traditional archaeology. With every new excavation, the starting line moves backward. 13,000, 18,000, 23,000, 32,000 years. The deeper we dig, the older the narrative becomes. And maybe that's the real heresy, that civilization doesn't emerge from nothing, but rests upon layers of forgotten lives, stacked like the very sediments we excavate. Stand at White Sands today, as twilight spills across the desert, and you can almost feel their presence, the weight of their steps pressing through time. The tracks shimmer faintly in the fading light, as if the past itself is breathing beneath the dust. Maybe they weren't the first to arrive. Maybe they were already the descendants of someone older, survivors of an age long vanished. Next, we follow the scientists who tried to measure these ages, and discover that even time itself begins to waver when pressed too hard. Time, in theory, should be absolute, a river flowing in one direction. Yet in archaeology, time is fragile. It bends under the weight of our assumptions about how nature behaves. The tool we rely on most to read the past, radiocarbon dating, is one such delicate compass. It looks precise, even elegant, but its accuracy depends on forces far beyond our control. For nearly a century, carbon-14 dating has served as the backbone of archaeology's timeline. The principle sounds simple. All living things absorb radioactive carbon from the air. When they die, that carbon decays at a steady rate. By measuring how much remains, scientists estimate when life ended. Logical, reliable, at least in theory. But every compass points true only when the magnetic field around it is stable, and Earth's field has never been still. When cosmic rays strike our atmosphere, they generate carbon-14, but those cosmic rays fluctuate. influenced by solar storms, magnetic reversals, volcanic eruptions, even distant supernovas. The level of carbon-14 in the air has never been constant, which means ancient samples can appear thousands of years older or younger than they really are. To correct this, scientists calibrate the data using tree rings and ice cores, but those records only reach back about 50,000 years. Beyond that, the calibration fades, and the curve of time begins to blur. Nowhere does that blur cause more controversy than in the Americas. In Valsequillo, Mexico, archaeologists uncovered blackened wood fragments buried deep under layers of volcanic ash. When tested, the samples returned a staggering age, 250,000 years, so old it would rewrite not just American history, but the entire story of humanity itself. The result was quickly dismissed as contamination, yet no contamination was ever proven. The dig was closed, the evidence shelved, because the number didn't fit inside the accepted model. At Pedra Ferrada in Brazil, history repeated itself. Stone tools found in layers dating 32,000 years or more were declared naturally fractured rocks. Critics said the site was unreliable because no organic remains could be dated, but that's the paradox. The absence of carbon doesn't mean the absence of people. It only means the clock we built can't tick there. Instead of questioning the clock, we erase the evidence. Even when radiocarbon dating appears to work, it often speaks in riddles. Samples taken inches apart can differ in age by tens of thousands of years. Burned wood, bone, and shell each tell slightly different tales, as if the Earth itself can't agree on its own memories. And still, archaeology leans on that fragile tool, because without it, the narrative dissolves into mist. Quietly, many in the field admit an unspoken truth, that uncomfortable results are often filtered out. Some laboratories refuse to test samples that seem too old for their context. Entire careers, theories, and funding systems depend on coherence. Data that doesn't fit is labeled error instead of mystery. One archaeologist once confessed that he falsified a site's details, claiming an artifact came from another dig, just to have it tested. When truth requires a lie to be heard, science itself becomes political. It's not that radiocarbon dating is wrong, it's that we've mistaken its precision for certainty. What was meant as a tool of probability has been turned into a doctrine of faith. We call it the gold standard. But every gold bar rests upon shifting sand. And if our most trusted compass begins to tremble, what happens to the map it drew? The dates of Monteverde, White Sands, Pedra Ferrada, each tested, challenged, recalibrated, all suggest that our timeline isn't a single straight line. It's more like a magnetic field, forever shifting, redrawn by the evidence we choose to overlook. Perhaps that's the real secret behind the 13,000-year wall. Not that it hides the truth, but that it comforts us with the illusion of knowing. To step beyond that wall is to enter a place where even time itself must be rediscovered. Where do you stand on that line, with the safety of certainty, or the pull of the unknown? Tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what time feels like where you are. As one geologist once said, rocks remember everything, we just haven't learned their language. Far to the north, deep within the humid jungles of Veracruz and Tabasco, colossal faces rise from the earth, their eyes half buried in moss and shadow, gazing silently through the centuries. They seem almost alive, as if carved from memory itself. Each face is massive and solemn, hewn from a single block of basalt weighing more than 50 tons. These are the Olmec heads, guardians of a forgotten age, and they do not fit neatly into the timeline we've been taught. No two faces are the same. One smiles faintly, another frowns, another stares with quiet strength. Some wear carved helmets etched with bands and symbols, others bear faint marks that might be writing. But what unites them all is not only their scale, it's their mystery. The Olmec appear suddenly in history around 100 BCE, building ceremonial centers, pyramids of earth, and intricate drainage systems. Then, just as suddenly, they vanish, leaving behind no records to explain their rise or their silence. Archaeologists call them the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the wellspring from which the Maya, the Aztec, and the Zapotec would later draw their calendars, gods, and cosmic mathematics. Yet, the Olmec themselves left no written story. Only these faces remain, their expressions calm, eternal, and unknowable. What confounds researchers most is not just their appearance, but their creation. The basalt used to carve them came from the distant Tuxtla Mountains, dozens of kilometers away, across rivers, swamps, and thick jungle. The Olmec had no wheels, no metal chisels, no beasts of burden. To move and sculpt such immense stones would have required a knowledge of engineering far beyond what their era allows. The usual explanations, rafts, rollers, and raw manpower, feel fragile beside the evidence. The heads are not crude, they are symmetrical, proportioned, masterful. Some note features that seem foreign. Wide noses, full lips and faces, unlike those of nearby populations. Others caution against reading race into stone, suggesting the heads represent stylized rulers or deities. Yet the question remains, why do they look so distinct? Were they portraits of real individuals, or symbols of a forgotten lineage remembered in stone? Many of the colossal heads were discovered face down, deliberately buried, as if placed in ritual rest. It's as though the Olmec were not displaying them, but concealing them, returning their ancestors, or their gods, to the earth. Were they hiding their history, protecting it, or laying it to rest until someone somewhere was ready to remember? Their art offers fragments of their world, human jaguar hybrids, feathered serpents, and gateways to the sky. Images that echo in the mythology of later Mesoamerican civilizations. Their monuments align with celestial points, solstices, star risings, cosmic cycles carved into stone. In 2006 at Caral, archaeologists unearthed a carved tablet marked with abstract symbols, possibly the oldest written language ever found in the Americas. If genuine, it means literacy here began centuries before the Maya script. Where did such knowledge come from? The Olmec appear in history already fluent in architecture, astronomy, metallurgy, irrigation, and geometry sacred enough to shape their cities. Then, without war or catastrophe, they fade into silence, their wisdom absorbed by the cultures that followed. Some independent thinkers suggest the Olmec may have inherited their craft from survivors of an earlier epoch, perhaps the same lost world that inspired Caral. In this view, the colossal heads are not portraits of rulers, but monuments to the first people, guardians of the dawn. At San Lorenzo, one of their oldest ceremonial centers, archaeologists found something even more curious: an underground network of basalt channels. Water once flowed beneath plazas, cooling the air and carrying sound through the city. To stand there today is to feel a low vibration, as if the stones themselves remember. Perhaps water was sacred to them, a mirror between worlds. The great heads might have been arranged around those plazas, like resonant sentinels, vibrating with the sound of drums and running water. If so, these weren't just sculptures, they were instruments of memory, vessels holding the frequencies of a forgotten science. When night falls over the tropical lowlands, the air grows heavy and the stars blur in the mist. You can almost see the faint glint of their eyes in the torchlight. They do not accuse, they simply wait for recognition, for remembrance, for the moment when humanity remembers who carved them and why they chose to hide their own image beneath the soil. Because beyond those silent faces, high in the mountains to the south, lies a plateau where stone itself seems to have been bent by impossible hands, where the builders of the Andes shaped diorite and andesite with surgical precision that defies explanation. At nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, among the clouds of the Bolivian Altiplano, stand the shattered ruins of Tiwanaku, a city so ancient and exact, it feels like it belongs to another world. Massive blocks the size of houses lie scattered like parts of a broken machine. Their cuts are clean, their corners perfect, their edges sharp enough to catch the light. And nearby, at a smaller site called Puma Punku, the mystery deepens. Here, immense stones of diorite and andesite, among the hardest on Earth, have been carved into H-shaped blocks and intricate interlocking forms, as though molded, not chiseled. Their surfaces are flat within fractions of a millimeter, circular holes drilled straight through the rock with a precision that seems mechanical, as if someone once wielded tools made of steel or diamond. Yet, according to accepted history, the builders had no metal, no cranes, not even the wheel. When the first explorers stumbled upon Puma Punku in the 16th century, they believed gods had made it. The Aymara people who live nearby still call it the Gate of the Puma, a threshold between worlds, built, they say, by the Viracocha, luminous beings who rose from Lake Titicaca to teach humankind the arts of civilization. To the west, that same lake still glimmers, vast and still, as though guarding the memory of its makers. Geologists have measured the stones. Some weigh over 100 tons, quarried from mountains more than 10 kilometers away. How they were moved remains unanswered. Logs could not have survived the altitude. Reed sleds would have sunk. And yet, the stones are here. Archaeologists date Tiwanaku's peak to between 500 and 900 CE, but the alignments of its temples suggest something far older. When the solstice sun rises, its rays pass perfectly through the eastern gate of the colossal temple, a precision that would vanish if the structure had been built even a few centuries earlier or later due to the slow shifting of Earth's axis. As the first light of dawn touches the Bolivian plateau, Tiwanaku and Puma Punku seem less like ruins and more like the remnants of a machine that once breathed. Every stone fits with a precision that feels intentional, as though the builders were engineers of vibration rather than architects of walls. Some of the stones bear interlocking notches and channels that suggest assembly, as if they were meant to be connected, forming something larger, something that once moved or resonated. Others contain fine grooves and circular cuts, so exact that even with modern tools, they would be difficult to reproduce. It's as if the builders possessed a kind of lost technology, not mechanical, but acoustic, harmonic, rooted in their understanding of sound, geometry, and the movement of the earth itself. Archaeologists studying Tiwanaku believe the city once stood as a spiritual and astronomical hub. Its temples, aligned to solar and stellar events, may have functioned as calendars carved into stone. Each equinox, the sun's light passes perfectly through the gates, marking the rhythm of the heavens, a cosmic clock built on the bones of the Andes. And yet, questions remain. How did a culture without metal tools carve granite harder than steel? How did they transport stones the weight of locomotives across barren plains? The theories, logs, sleds, wet clay, strain against reason. At this altitude, trees are scarce, and the terrain unforgiving. Perhaps, as local legends claim, the builders understood forces we no longer remember, ways to lift and shape matter using resonance, water, or magnetism. To the Aymara, the city was sacred not for what it contained, but for what it echoed, a bridge between worlds. When you walk among the broken stones, it feels less like exploring a ruin, and more like standing inside a musical instrument that has fallen silent. The wind moves through cracks and corridors, humming against the edges. The sound is low, haunting, and strangely harmonic, as if the city itself is remembering. Some believe Tiwanaku and Puma Punku are remnants of an even earlier civilization, one erased by floods or shifting continents. Others see them as humanity's first true temples of geometry, proof that knowledge rises, falls, and rises again, like the sun over the mountains. No matter which version you choose to believe, one truth lingers: these stones endure. Cut, measured, placed with intent, they hold their silence with the weight of time itself. As the solstice sun crosses the horizon, its rays pour through the ancient gate, touching each corner, each mark, each perfect edge, as though awakening the city once more. And for a brief moment, it feels as if Tiwanaku remembers, and is remembering us. If that alignment was deliberate, the original construction could reach back far beyond accepted dates, and the symbolism woven into its architecture hints at more than engineering. The Gate of the Sun, a single monolithic arch weighing around 10 tons, is carved with a central figure surrounded by 32 winged attendants. Some appear to hold circular objects, others stand near geometric motifs that recall rays or even gears. Scholars name the figure Viracocha, the creator, yet in myth, creation and craft often blur. Deities that move mountains, beings that cut stone with fire or sound. At Puma Punku, the 8-shaped stones fit together like modular pieces, not haphazardly but in standardized sizes that suggest mass production. Set side by side, grooves and recesses line up as if meant for mechanical assembly. Some engineers have wondered whether these once formed part of an immense structure, perhaps a ceremonial complex with moving elements, or a device for channeling sound, water, or even energy. One of the most haunting scenes lies in the sunken temple nearby, a subterranean courtyard whose walls are studded with sculpted heads. Each face is distinct, different features, expressions, even skull shapes, as if a gathering of peoples turned to stone. More than 100 stare outward. Who were they, and why immortalize them here? Could Tiwanaku have been less a city than a convocation, a meeting ground where distant cultures shared a single cosmic language? Modern 3D scans have measured tolerances that rival machined metal. Certain surfaces bear micro-scratches consistent with rapidly rotating tools. Others show signs of intense localized heat, as though the stone had been softened or reshaped while still solid. Conventional archaeology labels such traces anomalies. To those who study lost methods, they look like fingerprints, hints of techniques we no longer possess. Yet the deeper riddle may not be how the stones were shaped, but why so many remain unfinished. Scattered across Puma Punku are half-cut blocks, pieces frozen mid-process, as if work stopped in a heartbeat. The stones lie as if tossed by catastrophe, earthquake, flood, or something greater. Amara legends speak of a night when stars fell, when the gods wept fire and turned day to darkness. Could a celestial event, a comet perhaps, have ended the builder's age? Whatever came, Tiwanaku did not truly die. Later peoples, Inca and Aymara, raised temples upon its ruins, inheriting the architecture, but not the secret. To them, the stones were relics of a sacred time. When the Spanish arrived, they too were astonished. One conquistador wrote that these structures could not be the work of ordinary men. Perhaps in a way, they were giants, not in stature, but in understanding. The architects of Tiwanaku seem to have grasped a harmony between matter and vibration, between stone and sky. Following that resonance north through jungle and centuries, we meet another civilization that shared the same devotion to time, to architecture, to the heavens, the Maya, who turned astronomy into art. Their cities sleep under green canopies, waiting. Their calendars whisper not of years, but of cycles, worlds ending, worlds beginning again. The jungle never forgets, it only hides. For generations, the ruins of the Maya world lay buried under a living sea of leaves. Stone pyramids strangled by ceiba roots, temples masquerading as hills, cities swallowed by silence. Early explorers believed they'd found isolated monuments. Then satellites and LiDAR peeled back the canopy. An entire civilization emerged, vast, interconnected, obsessed with time. Among the most haunting rediscoveries was El Mirador, deep in the Petén Basin of northern Guatemala. Long before the classic cities of Tikal or Palenque, El Mirador already towered, a metropolis spreading over roughly 150 square kilometers. Its causeways stretching for miles through rainforest. The central pyramid, La Danta, rises more than 70 meters. By volume it surpasses even the Great Pyramid of Giza. Yet, El Mirador was built a millennium before the Maya Golden Age. When the world still pictured the Maya as primitive, they were already raising mountain. Archaeologists have uncovered lime-paved causeways, aqueducts, and a hydraulic web that channeled rain across high ground. These are not the marks of wanderers. They are the works of planners, astronomers, engineers. On temple walls, faint reliefs show serpents, suns, and twin divinities, early forms of gods that would later dominate Mesoamerica. Their myth was already in motion, treating creation not as a single dawn, but a cycle, echoing patterns seen at Caral and Tiwanaku. It is their script and calendar, though, that reveal the depth of Maya thought. Their hieroglyphs, more than 800 signs, appear in early forms, fully realized, not slowly evolving like Egyptian or Sumerian writing. Scholars still argue over how it emerged with such completeness. Some see inheritance from the Olmec or an older, unnamed source. Whatever its origin, this script could fix not only speech but ideas, cosmic cycles, dreams, histories measured in thousands of years. Their calendar astonishes even more. 3 interlocking systems like meshed gears in a celestial machine, the 2060-day Tzolk'in, the 3065-day Hub, and the long count, tracking days from a creation moment equivalent to August 11. While European astronomers still tuned their leap years, the Maya had achieved solar accuracy to within seconds. They built cities to embody that knowledge. Temples aligned to solstices and equinoxes. Staircases frame the rise of Venus. Window slits catch the morning star at the same angle every 8 years. At Uxmal, the Pyramid of the Magician follows lunar cycles. At Chichen Itza, the serpent shadow of Kukulkan slithers down the stairs at equinox. Time here was not merely measured, it was performed. What kind of culture serves the rhythm of the cosmos rather than the will of kings? The Maya imagined time as a living being, days as spirits, years as deities, worlds as recurring dreams. Every era ended in fire and was reborn from water. In such a vision, nothing is truly lost. Everything awaits its return. Still, the questions remain. Why did their script and architecture appear so fully formed? Why do their earliest cities show such mathematical perfection, as if based on an inherited code? Some researchers believe the Maya built atop foundations left by older cultures now swallowed by jungle, designs mirroring celestial blueprints passed in memory. Others hear, in their obsidian mirrors and instruments, an echo of a technology tuned not to machines but to consciousness. When the classic cities fell around the 9th century CE, the Maya did not vanish. They dispersed, carrying fragments of their calendars, symbols, and songs into the highlands. Even now in Guatemala and Chiapas, daykeepers still track the Tzolk'in, speaking names whispered for over 3,000 years. Time, to them, is alive. It can be spoken to. It can be healed. Perhaps that is what the builders of El Mirador tried to teach. Civilization is not measured by empire, but by harmony between human breath and the universe's pulse. Yet the Maya did not only build toward the sky, they built downward into the underworld, into caves, cenotes, and rivers, linking the living to the divine. To follow them, we must descend beneath the temples, where water shines like glass and echoes carry prayers from earth to gods. Beneath Maya pyramids lies another kind of city, made of darkness, sound, and water. It begins where the ground opens into cenotes, round blue wells scattered across the Yucatan portals to Xibalba. For the Maya, these pools were not mere water sources. They were thresholds, mirrors of the sky, bridges between worlds. In their stories, deities descended through such mouths of earth to shape humankind from maize and blood. Temples rose above these veins of stone, anchoring sacred architecture along the planet's living channels. At Chichen Itza beneath El Castillo, ground-penetrating radar revealed a natural cenote directly beneath the pyramid's heart. Not coincidence, intention. The temple sits at a junction where heaven above meets water below. When the equinox sun casts the serpent's shadow down the stairs, the tale resolves not on a step, but at the cenote's rim, an axis, completed sky, earth, underworld, joined by light. Within those waters, divers have found jade and gold, obsidian blades and human remains, offerings to Chak, the rainbringer. Far from crude spectacle, these rites sought balance. Life returned to living water, so life might continue. Thousands of artifacts have been raised. Necklaces, clay effigies, even wooden idols preserved in the cool depths. Deeper still lies a greater revelation. In 2018, explorers mapped the Sak-Ak-Tun system. More than 350 kilometers of flooded tunnels, the largest underwater cave network on Earth. Inside, they found altars, carved pillars, and traces of ritual fires sealed in air pockets for millennia. Suit on those vaults dates to the age of the earliest Maya cities. Someone walked there before the floods, lighting torches, performing ceremony in a darkness so complete that sound became sacred. The layout below was not improvised. Passages mirror the plans of temples above, as though pyramids were reflections of an underworld map. Acoustic tests show that chants, drums, even footsteps amplify into deep resonances tuned by the cave geometry. These were spaces built to speak with the unseen. At Palenque, the tomb of Kinik Janab Pakal rests atop stairs that descend into a symbolic underworld. The sarcophagus lid shows him poised within a complex device of cosmic symbols, often misread as machinery, but more likely the soul ascending the world tree, traveling through the dimensions of time. The Maya called such caverns Shem, mouths of the earth. To enter one was to die and be reborn. Priests went down with torches, hearts beating in time with their chants, invoking lords of death and dawn. Emerging soaked in sacred water, they carried visions to guide their cities. Modern divers speak of a near otherworldly calm, light fading to blue, stalactites glittering like chandeliers, water so still that it becomes a perfect mirror. In places, the line between above and below disappears. It's easy to see why the Maya believed these were cosmic mirrors, where one could look down and see the sky. Perhaps that is their hidden genius. They refused to split the physical from the spiritual. Every temple had a shadow. Every ascent had an echo. Civilization was vertical. The rise and return of the soul mapped in limestone and water. When Spanish chroniclers came, idols were smashed and many cenotes sealed, but silence remained. Even now, in those subterranean lakes, the water still reflects temples long collapsed, torchlight long gone. Divers sometimes report low hums and rhythmic pulses, maybe only the murmur of water through stone, or perhaps the memory of prayers rising in the dark, reaching for sunlight where the serpent's shadow still descends at equinox. From these hidden waterways, the trail rises again, northward, to a vast city, built not in jungle, but in a valley of stone. A city the Aztecs would call the place where humans become gods. We climb toward Teotihuacan, the city of the gods, whose makers remain nameless, and whose silence speaks louder than any inscription. 50 kilometers northeast of modern Mexico City lies a geometric ghost, broad avenues, stepped pyramids, plazas laid out with unsettling precision. 2,000 years ago, it was the largest city in the Americas, rivaling Rome and Chang'an, yet no one knows its original name. When the Aztecs arrived in the 14th century, it had long been abandoned. They held it sacred, believing the gods remade the sun here after a cataclysm. They offered it its pyramids to restore the cosmic balance, but beneath their reverence was unknowing, the language, the rulers, all erased. The Avenue of the Dead runs nearly 3 kilometers, angled about 15.5 degrees east of north. At its heart rises the Pyramid of the Sun, more than 3 million tons of stone, its base nearly matching Giza's. Facing it stands the Pyramid of the Moon, smaller yet raised on higher ground to balance the horizon. Between them, processions once moved, priests, astronomers, perhaps leaders whose names we will never speak. Excavations show a plan from the beginning: streets at right angles, drains beneath plazas, multi-story apartments hinting at civic design. Walls once glowed red with murals of jaguars, eagles, suns, symbols of change and rebirth. No portraits of kings, no dynastic boasts. The city speaks in shared emblems, not egos, more instrument than palace, a machine for ceremony. Beneath the Pyramid of the Sun, a tunnel yielded offerings: jade, obsidian, shells from far coasts, bones of jungle creatures never native to these heights. Not decoration, connection, linking mountain city to sea to sky to underworld. In 2003, beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, a deeper passage was found. Archaeologist Sergio Gomez's team uncovered statues, vessels, pyrite mirrors, and strange spheres dusted with metallic glitter that glowed under light. Traces of liquid mercury pooled along the floor, a metal of transformation. How did they gather and handle it? Why here, under a star-aligned sanctuary? Perhaps it mirrored the heavens below, a sky of liquid light. Perhaps it symbolized blood beneath the city's heart. The entire plan echoes the cosmos. The avenue meets the setting of the Pleiades. The pyramids map planetary positions. From above, the pattern calls to mind Orion's belt. The constellation also echoed at Giza. Two civilizations, oceans apart, both writing the sky in stone. Coincidence or inheritance? Teotihuacan's lack of writing may signal not ignorance, but initiation. Serpents, stars, and suns repeat like a code. Knowledge here may have been transmitted in architecture, sound, and ritual rather than script. Stand atop the Pyramid of the Moon and clap. The echo snaps back as the call of the Quetzal, the sacred bird. The plaza is a resonator. The city was designed to speak. Then, around the 6th century CE, it fell. Fire-scorched palaces and temples, not common homes, a sign of unrest within, perhaps revolt against a priestly order, perhaps the failure of a cosmic covenant. Whatever the cause, Teotihuacan emptied, rituals ended, lights went dark, names dissolved. Yet, when you stand on the Pyramid of the Sun at dawn and mist lifts across the valley, the city stirs, geometry hums in the bones. The wind carries whispers like distant chant. It is as if the stones remember, waiting for the next turning when humans will again become gods. Teotihuacan was not alone. Across the continent, other peoples built with similar quiet precision, aligning mounds to solstices, rivers to stars. Farther north, A metropolis rose beside the Mississippi, where wood stood in for stone, but the language of the cosmos remained. Near today's St. Louis, gentle green hills rise from the plain. They seem ordinary until you understand they are pyramids. Centuries ago, a city thrived here with a complexity to match any in the ancient world. We call it Cahokia, the heartbeat of a civilization time has nearly forgotten. At its height around 1100 CE, Cahokia spread over 6 square miles and housed perhaps 40,000 people, more than London at the time. Plazas, causeways, palisades, and more than 100 earthen mounds formed a planned landscape. At the center stood Monk's Mound, a platform the size of a stone pyramid, built from some 22 million cubic feet of earth, carried basket by basket. From its summit, observers watched the sky their ancestors had read for ages. Each year at solstice sunrise, light pierced a ring of tall posts. Woodhenge, the central stake, framed the equinox precisely, dividing the year in sacred halves. Cahokia's architects mastered cycles, agriculture, and geometry, turning prairie into an observatory. Trade tied the city to distant coasts and mountains, copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf, obsidian from the Rockies, mica from the Appalachians. Rivers served as arteries for goods and ideas. Finds of fine jewelry, effigy pipes, and textiles speak of artisanship and specialized labor. Streets aligned to the cardinal directions, residential districts, communal courts, a civitas in earth. We do not know what they called themselves. Cahokia is a later name, as at Teotihuacan, our label covers a vanished identity. Some early Europeans balked at what they saw. A mound greater than the works of Egypt, one wrote, though built of earth. Others denied indigenous authorship, conjuring lost tribes or Atlantis. Modern research has long disproved such notions. Yet, the rise and fall remain a puzzle. Soil layers record floods and droughts in alternating swings that could have strained crops and driven dispersal. Cultural echoes bind Cahokia to wider traditions. Spiral and cross motifs on shell pendants resemble Maya cosmograms. The four-directional plan mirrors Mesoamerican layouts. Woodhenge speaks an old tongue, skywatching, timekeeping, renewal. Some see in Cahokia part of a continental memory, an inheritance of cosmic building from Andes to Mississippi. Others believe its planners aligned not just to the sun, but to Earth's deeper rhythm. Across Ohio, Wisconsin, and Iowa, more signs lie in the ground. Effigy mounds shaped like birds, bears, and serpents, visible only from above. The Great Serpent Mound winds for over 400 meters, its coils keyed to lunar standstills that occur only every 18.6 years. To carve such precision without instruments demanded patience and astronomical mastery. Stand by the serpent at dusk, and the earth seems to breathe. The head points to the solstice sunset. The tail curves toward the moonrise. For its makers, this was not art alone. It was language, land turned into script, written in soil and light, legible to the sky. As at Teotihuacan and Caral, the story ends quietly. After 1300 CE, Cahokia thinned, wood decayed, plazas flooded, mounds slumped to hills. No conquest, a soft exhale. People likely followed the rivers, carrying calendars and myths to new homes. Among their descendants, Natchez, Choctaw, and other Mississippian peoples, the mound remains sacred, a place where earth meets sky. Today the plan is still visible from above, a geometry too exact to be chance. Archaeologists can map every mound and alignment, but not the awe felt when the first sunrise pierced Woodhenge and lit the city into life. The ground, they say, remembers when people do not. The mounds breathe through seasons, whispering in wind and grass. Perhaps beneath the clay, the spirit of the builders lingers, waiting for someone to hear their rhythm again. From here the trail turns west, into lands of canyons and stone, where another people, the ancestral Puebloans, etched sun and moon into cliff walls and drew roads along the stars. Their cities were carved from desert rock, their calendars cast in shadow. In the silence, their architecture still ticks, a clock of sunlight and stone. The desert of the American Southwest seems endless, mesas and cliffs rising like fossil waves, air shimmering with heat, silence heavy as rock. Within that stillness lie traces of a people who turned an arid horizon into a web of light and geometry. We call them the ancestral Puebloans. Their descendants call themselves the people of the sun and sky. Their cities did not cling to rivers or hide in jungle. They were carved straight from stone. The most extraordinary rose in what is now New Mexico, Chaco Canyon. From above it appears as a spiral of sandstone, great houses radiating from a central plaza, vast blocks with hundreds of rooms, laid out with a precision to rival any ancient metropolis. Courses of sandstone alternating with timber create a cadence so regular it becomes an architectural heartbeat running through every wall. At first glance, Chaco's desolation seems to contradict its scale. Few trees, no constant streams, summers that burn. Yet between the 9th and 12th centuries, this stark canyon became the hub of a regional network stretching hundreds of kilometers. Roads arrow straight and eerily wide cut the desert, linking more than 150 outlying communities. They were not random trails, many align with solar and lunar cycles, only visible from high vantage or across great distance. Some, like the Great North Road, run dead straight for miles, crossing cliffs and arroyos without deviation. Modern surveyors confirm bearings locked on true north. Why carve such lines through rock and emptiness, without compasses or maps? In the Puebloan view, these were more than roads. They were lines of power, ritual corridors mirroring the paths of sun and moon. Inside the great houses, astronomy is everywhere. Doorways and windows frame solstices, equinoxes, and lunar standstills with deliberate care. The most famous alignment lies at Fajada Butte, the solitary sandstone spine rising from the canyon floor. There, a spiral petroglyph is pierced by slender blades of light. On summer solstice morning, a single dagger strikes the spiral's heart. On the winter solstice, twin daggers bracket it exactly. We call it the sun dagger. The effect is so precise that slight shifts in rock due to erosion have already disturbed it. For its makers, such accuracy was not vanity. Time was alive, a being to honor, feed, and attend. The sun dagger was a conversation with the sky, renewed season after season. How then did a sophisticated society thrive in desert? Chaco's builders engineered water, dams, canals, reservoirs, a hydrologic web to catch brief rains, terraced fields, raised maize, beans and squash. Turkey feather blankets held back winter cold. Trade tied them to distant worlds, turquoise, copper bells, shells from Mexico, a chain linking the southwest to Mesoamerica in commerce and symbols. In kivas, circular ritual chambers sunk in the earth. Priests and sky watchers timed ceremonies to the celestial clock. Smooth plastered walls echoed like drums. Chants rose and the stone carried their vibration. Here, myth and mathematics merged. The Sepapu, the portal of human emergence, retold in rhythm with the dance of planets. Chaco's decline remains a riddle. Around 150 CE, drought struck. Roads that pulsed with life fell silent. Some great houses were ritually sealed, doorways blocked, hearths extinguished, offerings buried beneath polished floors. The people did not vanish, they moved. Sky stories traveled to new mesas, the Hopi, the Zuni, Acoma, Taos and beyond. Even now, descendants walk solstice paths their ancestors watched at Chaco, and in the desert, the roads remain, faint scars visible from the air, running to the north, the east, the west. Engineers who study them note they seem built for visibility, not transport. They connect, not towns, but directions. They point toward the horizon, toward something beyond the human world. At sunset, when red light spills across the sandstone, Chaco feels like a vast sundial, a city tuned to the heartbeat of the cosmos. Every window becomes a lens. Every shadow counts a second. Gold fades to indigo. The Milky Way unfurls like a celestial road above. It is the same road Pueblo people still call the Path of Souls, along which spirits travel west to join the ancestors. So the American story repeats its rhythm. Architecture as astronomy, geometry as faith, cities aligned not to kings but to the cosmos. South of here, the forest keeps a different tale of abundance, mystery and disappearance. Beneath the Amazon canopy, the legends of El Dorado may hide something more profound, not treasure, but an ecosystem engineered by forgotten hands. We descend from desert stone into living green, where roads become rivers and civilization grows within the earth itself. For centuries, explorers chased a shining city through the Amazon, El Dorado. hidden in a sea of leaves. Men vanished into the green, returning empty-handed, yet speaking of broad causeways, earth mounds, villages glimpsed beneath vines. Scholars dismissed these as fevered mirage. The Amazon, they said, was pristine wilderness, its soils too poor to nourish cities. But forests keep secrets. With satellites and LiDAR, the myth breathes again. In recent years, mapping in the Bolivian Amazon revealed a revelation. Beneath the canopy lie hundreds of interconnected cities, complete with causeways, canals, pyramids, and terraces, invisible to the naked eye. Not isolated villages, but a web of urban landscapes linked by straight roads and hydraulic systems stretching for miles. The air itself seems to hum with impossible geometry. Archaeologists call this the Cassarabi culture, flourishing between roughly 500. Their largest centers, like Kotoka and Landiva, stand on raised platforms with conical pyramids of compact earth, bound by elevated causeways riding above seasonal floods. On the fringes, canals, fish ponds, irrigated plots, not scars on the land, but symphonies of coexistence. Beneath these cities lies terra preta, black earth born of charcoal, bone and compost. A human-made soil that remains fertile for centuries. It spreads across millions of hectares, a signature of deliberate design. This was not untouched wilderness. It was a cultivated forest, a living garden feeding thousands. These people mastered balance, using biodiversity as architecture. El Dorado changes meaning. Its gold may not have been metal, but fertility itself, the glowing yield of managed wetlands, the sacred shimmer of a culture that worshipped equilibrium over conquest. Even chronicles, once mocked, begin to sound prophetic. In 1542, Friar Gaspar de Carvajal described long strings of towns along the riverbanks, divided by fields and orchards. For generations, historians called it fantasy. Now the LiDAR patterns echo his words, ghosts of plazas, roads, walls, still hiding beneath trees. The implications are immense. We painted the Amazon as Eden untouched, where nature ruled and people barely entered. In truth, it was a garden civilization flourishing for millennia, then fading under disease and colonization. Its legacy is the forest itself, a biome shaped by ancient design. To walk there now is to tread buried avenues. Under the roots, memory, shards of ceramics, charcoal-rich soils that still nourish crops. Locals speak of earthworks. Indigenous peoples call them the bones of their ancestors. Not ruins, but living relatives breathing beneath the soil. El Dorado, long cast as greed's illusion, may preserve a truer treasure, knowledge, how to make a forest bloom without end. This overturns our sense of progress. So-called primitive Amazonians achieved sustainability we struggle to imagine. They built without erasing, lived without exhausting, and vanished without poisoning what remained. When the jungle reclaimed their world, it did not destroy their work. It became their monument. Under moonlight, the canopy ripples like a green ocean. One can almost feel invisible streets below, ancient water channels still guiding the rain. The forest is their cathedral, insects for choir, frogs and birds for bells. From the floodplains to the high Andes, from desert mesas to Mexican valleys, a pattern repeats. Civilizations rise, align with nature and sky, then fall, leaving whispers instead of empires. Yet not all knowledge vanished. Some traveled farther than we think, across oceans, encoded in myths and maps that resurfaced in the Old World centuries later. The next chapter asks a forbidden question. What if the ancient Americas were not alone? What if sailors, priests, and astronomers crossed seas long before Columbus, leaving traces in charts, bloodlines, and legend? To follow that possibility, we step off the continents into open water, where the edge of history dissolves. Standard tales begin with an ocean dividing worlds. Old World, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, New World, the Americas, untouched until 1492. Between them yawns the Atlantic like a wall. But what if that wall was never there? What if the ocean was a bridge, and humanity's story is connection, not isolation? The first crack came not from myth but from a map. In 1929, in the archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, a curious chart surfaced, the Piri Reis map, drawn on gazelle skin in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral. It shows the coasts of Africa, South America, and what appears to be Antarctica, centuries before its official discovery. Stranger still, the land is drawn ice-free, with mountain ranges later confirmed under the ice by modern sounding. Piri Reis wrote that he compiled his chart from 20 older sources, Greek, Arabic, and some said to predate the flood. If even partly true, fragments of a prehistoric maritime tradition survived into the Renaissance, preserving coasts mapped before recorded time. And the Piri Reis map is not alone. Other 15th and 16th century charts, Orontes Phineas, Zeno, Boissy, display startlingly accurate outlines of lands then unknown in Europe. Scholars file these away as anomalous projections. Taken together, they whisper of something larger, a network of knowledge carried across ages, copied, distorted, and reborn. How could that be? Could ancient civilizations have mastered global navigation long before the compass? Traditions around the world seem to whisper yes. Polynesian wayfinders crossed the Pacific, guided only by stars, waves, and birds. The Phoenicians circled Africa 3 millennia ago. Egyptian papyri spoke of a land beyond the Western Sea. And across the Americas, stories tell of bearded visitors from across the water, teachers, traders, or gods, who brought seeds, metal, or tales of the stars. Even genetics and botany offer quiet confirmation. Traces of nicotine and cocaine, plants native only to the Americas, have been found in Egyptian mummies, and varieties of sweet potato, born in South America, reached Polynesia thousands of years before European contact. How could they have crossed 10,000 miles of ocean? By trade winds, by raft, or simply by time? Then there is the Solutrean hypothesis. Controversial yet persistent, the Ice Age Europeans, following the Atlantic pack ice, reached North America 20,000 years ago. Stone tools dredged from the Chesapeake Bay floor bear striking resemblance to those of Paleolithic France. Mainstream science resists the idea, fearing it overshadows indigenous origins. But the theory's endurance reveals something older than debate: humanity's need to cross boundaries, an instinct deeper than nation or memory. Even within the Americas, echoes of ancient globalism abound. Olmec jade traced to Guatemala, spondylus shells from Ecuador found in Mexico, copper from the Great Lakes in Mesoamerican relics. Proof of a trade web stretching from pole to tropic. These networks mirror the ocean currents themselves, as if guided by the same invisible geometry that binds continents. To imagine such voyages is to rediscover our oldest faith, that we are explorers. We read clouds as compasses, stars as maps, birds as omens. A dugout canoe on the Pacific, or a reed boat on the Atlantic might seem fragile, yet the ocean rewards rhythm and patience. Sailors who knew its heartbeat could cross not by chance, but by design. Perhaps that is why myths across the world repeat the same pattern: knowledge emerging from the sea. In Sumer, it was Oannes, the fishman, who taught writing. In Egypt, Osiris came from the waters. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl arrived from the Eastern Sea, promising to return. In the Andes, Viracocha rose from Lake Titicaca, bearing the gifts of civilization. Different names, same current, a messenger from the deep bringing memory of a vanished world. If these tales share a root, then the old world and the new were never truly divided. They were two halves of a single rhythm, separated only by forgetfulness. Today, oceanographers map submerged plateaus and ruins along both shores, remnants of coastal civilizations drowned when Ice Age glaciers melted. Off the Bahamas, divers follow the Bimini Road, great limestone blocks forming a pattern like a harbor. Off Cuba, sonar reveals avenues and pyramids lying half a kilometer beneath the waves. Natural or crafted, they all echo the same question: how much of our past sleeps beneath the sea? Perhaps the final bridge between these worlds lies there, under the waves, in the twilight, where myth becomes archaeology. Because every story ends where it began, in water. And so we turn our gaze to the depths, where the last echo of this 13,000-year mystery waits. A drowned world, half memory, half legend, the one storytellers called Atlantis. At the edge of the Cuban shelf, where the Caribbean drops into blackness, sonar has revealed a geometry that should not exist. Pyramids, boulevards, rectangular foundations, half a kilometer down. When the first images surfaced in 2001, skeptics called them natural formations, yet divers described carved steps, polished faces, symmetry too deliberate for chance, the site became known as the Cuban Atlantis, a name balanced between belief and denial. Whether truth or mirage, the idea itself is ancient. 24 centuries ago, Plato wrote of an island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, larger than Libya and Asia combined, a civilization of gold and crystal, canals and temples, destroyed in a single night of fire and flood. Scholars long treated it as allegory, a moral of hubris punished. But across the Americas, the same refrain appears: a flood, a sky of fire, cities swallowed by the sea. The Maya Popol Vuh tells of the first dawn, drowned in water. The Inca speak of Lake Titicaca rising to erase the people of the sun. The Hopi remember the Third World ending in flood, before the next began. Along the Mississippi, tales tell of a serpent uncoiling beneath the rivers, bringing both ruin and renewal. Could these be fragments of remembrance, not metaphor, but memory? 12 to 13,000 years ago, as the last ice age melted, the oceans rose over 100 meters. Entire coastlines vanished, from the Yucatan to Florida, from Brazil to the Bahamas. If civilizations thrived there, they now rest beneath centuries of silt. Sonar mapping has found anomalies on every shore: terraces off Bimini, walls off Yonaguni, ruins off Cuba, and India's Gulf of Cambat. Each discovery revives the same argument: coincidence or construction. At Bimini, the stones form a path, roughly aligned with the solstice sunrise. Critics call it fractured beach rock. Yet, under dim blue light, geometry insists: angles too neat, lines too true. The sea cannot quite erase intention. Still, the deeper meaning may not lie in archaeology, but in symbolism. Water destroys, yet it also preserves. It buries, but it remembers. Currents still follow ancient routes that may once have connected continents. Within them swirl the sediments of vanished lands, tiny grains that once formed homes, walls, and roads. Every tide becomes a heartbeat of the planet's memory. Perhaps Atlantis was never one city, but a pattern, a recurring rhythm in human history. A civilization rises, masters its world, loses balance, and is reclaimed by the elements. Each flood erases, yet renews. Each ending plants the seed of the next beginning. The Maya counted such cycles as worlds, 4 or 5 so far, each ended by cataclysm, each reborn from the ruins of the last. The 13,000-year cycle is not just a number, it is a pulse. You can hear it in the black layers of soot and iridium, marking ancient extinctions, in myths mirrored across oceans, in the coordinates of temples aligned to the stars. The Earth keeps time. Every 12 or 13 millennia, something shifts. Ice melts, seas rise, stars move, the clock of catastrophe turns again. And now, as satellites map the deep and climates tremble at their edges, that rhythm stirs once more. Perhaps we stand at the threshold of another turning. Perhaps the drowned cities of the past are speaking in their last language, silence and depth. Stand on the shore at night and let the horizon fade. You can feel it, something vast, just beyond the waves. The sea breathes, remembering. The stars shimmer above, reflected in its dark mirror, and for a moment you cannot tell which is sky and which is sea, which is past and which is now, because history is not a line. It is a tide, advancing, receding, returning, carrying fragments of forgotten worlds. If these mysteries stir something in you, a faint déjà vu, a memory older than history, you are not alone. Where are you listening from tonight? What time is it where you are? If these echoes of lost worlds move you as they move us, subscribe and let the next story find you, wherever you are, when the tide turns again. The tide retreats, and the stars shimmer like scattered embers across the dark sea. In the stillness between waves, something feels unfinished, as if the ocean itself is waiting for us to remember. For centuries, humanity has stood at the water's edge, gazing outward, listening for echoes of what was lost. But perhaps what calls from beneath the surface is not only memory, it is invitation. If Atlantis was never a single city but a rhythm, then every age carries its own Atlantis within it. A rise, a brilliance, a fall, and a silence. The pattern is not punishment, it is renewal. Each collapse clears the way for a new awakening, a reminder that nothing truly disappears, it only changes form. The civilizations of the past, Caral, Tiwanaku, Teotihuacan, Chaco, the Maya, the Amazonians, each followed the same hidden mathematics. Each aligned their temples and calendars not to the will of rulers, but to the breath of the universe. They built for harmony, not domination. And when their cycles closed, they left behind not ruins, but instructions carved in geometry, stone and myth, for those who would listen later. When the earth turned cold again, when forests swallowed their cities and seas covered their coastlines, their knowledge sank into legend, but energy never vanishes. It waits, humming beneath the skin of time, until another generation rediscovers the rhythm and begins to build again. Maybe that generation is ours. In the last century, our satellites have become the new pyramids, monuments not of stone, but of signal and light. Our telescopes look outward, yet they mirror the same longing the ancients had when they built observatories from rock and prayer. They too wanted to see where the heavens end and the unknown begins. The difference is that they looked upward with reverence, not conquest. They believed that understanding the stars was the same as understanding the self. What if the next Atlantis is not a city of gold or marble, but consciousness itself? What if the real treasure of the ancient world was not its architecture, but its awareness? The understanding that the cosmos and the mind are reflections of each other. The Maya spoke of time as alive, breathing in cycles. The Pueblo called the Milky Way the path of souls. The Andean priests described life as vibration, moving between worlds. And now, physics whispers the same truth, that everything, even thought, is frequency. It's almost as if the ancients were never primitive, only poetic, describing with story what we now describe with science. When we listen to the rhythm of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, we hear the same number repeated, roughly 25,000 years. A cosmic day, half of that, about 12,500 to 13,000 years, is a night. Each time the night ends, the light returns, and humanity begins again. Perhaps we are standing now at the edge of dawn. Around the world, forgotten ruins are awakening. Forests, in the Amazon, reveal cities under their leaves. Deserts in Arabia give up the outlines of vanished rivers. Glaciers retreat to expose roads once walked by people whose names we no longer know. It is as though the planet itself is remembering, revealing its own archives. If the 13,000-year cycle is real, then this moment, this century, may be another crossing. The ice melts, the climate shifts, the stars realign. We can fear it, or we can read it. Because what is happening now may not be an ending at all, but a turning. The ancients knew that endings were only half the story. The Hopi called it Palungo Hoya, the heartbeat of the world, a vibration that keeps creation in motion. When the balance falters, the pulse grows faint. When humans remember harmony, the heartbeat strengthens. If you close your eyes now, you can almost feel it. A deep, slow thrum beneath the surface of the earth, steady and alive. Every ruin is a reminder. Every myth is a map, and every ocean carries not just the memory of what was drowned, but the potential of what can return. Perhaps the greatest mistake of modern civilization is thinking we are separate from nature, from one another, from the pulse that built the stars. Yet every monument the ancients left behind, from the spirals of Caral to the serpents of Cahokia, tells the same story: unity, stone, sun, and human breath, working together as one. Maybe the final message of the lost world is simple, that the next golden age will not be found in the discovery of new lands, but in rediscovering balance. The old civilizations rose when they built in harmony with sky and soil, and fell when they forgot that rhythm. Our era stands at that same edge, suspended between memory and possibility. Imagine if the true descendants of Atlantis are not bloodlines, but ideas that surface again when humanity is ready to listen. We find them in the way a spiral galaxy mirrors the carving on a temple wall, or how ancient songs match the frequencies of modern physics. The patterns are everywhere, waiting to be read. The sea whispers them every night. The stars write them across the darkness, and deep in our own breath, they echo. As the tide rises once more, the horizon begins to glow, faint, golden, alive. It's as if the ocean itself is breathing the world awake again. Somewhere beyond that line of light, the next chapter is forming, waiting to be written not in stone, but in understanding. And maybe that is the gift of the forgotten ages. to remind us that we are not at the end of history, but the beginning of remembering. The waves continue their slow conversation with the shore. The air hums with the rhythm of the stars. And as you listen wherever you are, in whatever time, you can almost hear the heartbeat of the earth syncing once more with ours. Because history is not finished. It only sleeps. And the world, like us, is beginning to wake. Night stretches across the oceans like a sheet of glass. Stars ripple upon the surface as if the universe itself were leaning closer, watching us remember. The wind hums low against the waves, carrying whispers from the deep, not warnings but invitations. Every age of humankind has believed itself unique, separate from what came before. But the evidence buried in stone, soil, and starlight says otherwise. The same mathematics that shaped the pyramids reappears in the architecture of our cities, in the circuitry of our machines, even in the rhythm of our heartbeat. The spiral, the golden ratio, the pulse, all return, patterns ancient as the cosmos, repeating in new forms. In laboratories and observatories, scientists speak of resonance and vibration, unaware that the ancients spoke of the same thing in different words. They called it song. The universe, they said, was sung into being. Modern physics calls it the harmonic field, energy vibrating through matter, shaping galaxies and atoms alike. Perhaps the difference between science and myth is not meaning, but melody. Across the planet, the forgotten frequencies are returning. Monks in Himalayan monasteries chant tones measured to match the frequency of Earth's rotation. Archaeologists decode the acoustics of ancient temples and find that their chambers amplify sound to precise resonant pitches. In Peru, the stepped pyramids of Caral hum when wind passes through their corridors, creating a low tone that vibrates in the chest. In Chaco Canyon, when a drum strikes near the kivas, echoes bounce in patterns identical to heartbeats. It's as if every sacred site was tuned, not to gods of heaven, but to the frequency of life itself. The ancients didn't build merely to honor the sky. They built to remember how to listen. When you listen long enough, you begin to feel what they felt, that the planet is alive, that silence has shape, that consciousness itself may be the oldest architecture of all. We build towers of glass now and send satellites into orbit. But our greatest structures are invisible, networks of thought, energy, and data flowing around the globe. To some, this is technology. To others, it is the reawakening of the same ancient grid. The invisible geometry that once connected temples, pyramids, and stars. Our satellites trace the same ley lines the ancients once mapped with stones and song. It's as if the Earth's memory is rebooting, a global pulse syncing to a forgotten rhythm. And yet, as before, the cycle asks for balance. Knowledge without harmony becomes noise. Power without humility collapses into dust. The civilizations of the past did not vanish because they lacked intelligence. They vanished because they forgot the rhythm that sustains it. If the pulse of the earth could speak, it might say, remember what you build with, not just what you build for. Because every structure, physical or spiritual, is only as stable as the balance that birthed it. In the deserts of Arabia, archaeologists have found stone circles aligned perfectly to the solstice. In the jungles of Cambodia, temples emerge from under vines in perfect symmetry with Orion's belt. Off the coasts of Japan, stairways carved into the seabed mimic the proportions of temples above the water. Everywhere the same pattern repeats, geometry speaking through ages. It's almost as if all civilizations were fragments of a single mind, dreaming through time. The earth does not remember us as nations or empires. It remembers vibrations, the frequencies of what we felt, what we believed, what we created in harmony or discord. Each age leaves behind its song. The pyramids sing in golden ratios. The Mayan calendar beats in cycles. The roads of Chaco align to the same rhythm the stars trace above. Even the Amazon hums with photosynthetic music, a green pulse of light and breath. Now, as our machines hum with electricity, we too are part of the composition. The difference is that our melody is loud, chaotic, still finding its tone. The ancients tuned themselves to the earth. We have yet to tune ourselves to our creation, but balance always returns. The 13,000-year cycle is not only a pattern of destruction, it is a recalibration, a cosmic inhale and exhale. Each time the earth shifts, it tests whether we can remember the harmony of life. In this moment, perhaps, that memory is returning. People everywhere are drawn once more to stars, to meditation, to silence, to meaning beyond consumption. The old stories, once dismissed as myth, are being reread as metaphors of consciousness. The sacred geometry of temples finds echoes in neuroscience, in fractals, in the architecture of dreams. The spiral of DNA mirrors the path of galaxies. Everything repeats, because everything is connected. Maybe that is what the ancients wanted us to learn before their world sank. That humanity is not separate from the cosmos, but an expression of it. That civilizations are not accidents of evolution, but awakenings of awareness. That our true monument is not the city we build, but the consciousness we share. And if that is true, then Atlantis, Caral, Teotihuacan, Tiwanaku, all of them were not lost cities, but reflections, mirrors of stages in our own evolution. Each rose when humans remembered they were part of something vast, and each fell when they forgot. So where does that leave us now? On the edge of a new dawn, standing again between memory and possibility. It leaves us in the same place humanity has always stood, between the known and the mysterious, looking upward and inward at once. The ancients built in stone, we build in light. They mapped the stars, we map data. They spoke in myth, we speak in science. But the song remains the same. The question remains the same. Who are we in the great rhythm of time? Perhaps in the quiet of night, when technology rests and the sea is calm, the answer is simple. We are the echo of everything that has ever lived, remembering itself. And if we listen closely to the tide, to the pulse beneath the ground, to the faint hum between heartbeats, we might hear what the ancients heard. Not gods, not ghosts, but the universe itself, whispering, begin again. Morning spreads across the water like breath over glass. For a moment, horizon and sky blur into one endless glow. The sea is calm now, but beneath that stillness, a quiet vibration moves, the same deep rhythm that has guided worlds before ours. The ancients said the universe renews itself in spirals. Each turn brings the familiar, reshaped, and so it is again. The knowledge we call modern, astronomy, architecture, energy, even consciousness, are not inventions, but memories returning. Everywhere, the signs awaken. In the mountains of Peru, sound engineers record frequencies inside ancient temples and discover harmonics identical to those used in modern healing music. In Mexico, infrared drones trace invisible lines under the soil that connect old pyramids like nodes on a circuit. In the Atlantic, sonar picks up pulses too regular to be geological. Each finding begins as anomaly, ends as pattern. The Earth is tuning itself, one echo at a time. Perhaps this is why so many of us feel restless. The same way the ocean swells before the tide changes, consciousness swells before transformation. We sense something rising, not catastrophe but memory, a pull to reconnect with the sky, the soil, the unseen. The 13,000-year cycle turns again, the night ends, dawn approaches. Civilizations fall when they build walls between spirit and matter, between self and world. They rise when they remember that everything breathes together. In our time, that remembering begins quietly. A scientist who listens to whales and hears mathematical language. A child planting a tree and watching the sun mark its growth. An astronomer who sees a nebula and feels déjà vu, little awakenings, scattered like sparks. They are the same lights that once built the cities of stone. The same curiosity that carved spirals into rock to follow the solstice sun. The same wonder that turned mud and reed into instruments of sound. Humanity has never forgotten. It only fell asleep. Now, slowly it stirs. The ancients would have called this the fifth sun, the new world. In their calendars, every age ended with water and began with light. The Maya believed each dawn was a rebirth of consciousness, the moment when the gods remembered themselves through human eyes. Maybe the gods were never distant beings. Maybe they were us, awakening each cycle to our own potential. Today, we carry the old symbols in new forms. Our satellites trace constellations of communication. Our sensors measure vibrations through the planet's crust. Our art returns to sacred geometry, spirals, circles, mandalas, as if guided by invisible memory. Even the rhythm of digital code, ones and zeros pulsing through fiber and sky, echoes the heartbeat patterns etched into the oldest drums. The language has changed, but the song remains. The next golden age will not rise from stone, but from understanding. It will come when knowledge and reverence, science and story, finally walk together, when progress remembers its purpose, harmony, not dominance. The ancients called this Aini, sacred reciprocity, to take only what one can give back. The earth whispers it still, through wind in ruins, through the shimmer of leaves, through the hum of distant stars. Balance is not lost. It waits. Imagine a future where our cities breathe again. Towers covered in living green, rivers flowing clean through streets aligned to sunrise, machines powered by rhythm instead of extraction. It sounds like dream, yet it is only memory returning in another shape. The same geometry that once guided Caral and Cahokia can guide us again if we choose to listen. Every age leaves an inheritance. Ours may be the rediscovery that consciousness and creation are one, that every act of kindness alters the frequency of the world, that every thought, like a note, joins the larger harmony. And perhaps that is the true reason the ancients built for the heavens, not to worship stars, but to remind us we are made of them. The carbon in our breath, the iron in our blood, the calcium in our bones, all born in the heart of supernovas billions of years ago. We are literally the dust of stars learning to see itself, the universe observing its own reflection through human eyes. When that realization returns fully, history will no longer be a tale of rise and fall, but of rhythm, expansion, rest, renewal. No civilization truly ends. It changes tempo. The pulse continues. Maybe one day far ahead, when our monuments fade and our data dissolves into silence, another generation will uncover traces of us. Glass turned to sand, metal to dust, stories whispered through magnetic fields. They will wonder who we were and how we dreamed. And if we have listened well, they will feel not warning, but warmth. They will sense that we left them music. Because every age, at its close, sends a note forward, a single tone of remembrance. The ancients sent theirs through stone and myth. We send ours through light and language. And together, across eons, those notes form the same unbroken chord. The sea breathes. The stars tremble. The planet hums beneath our feet. You can hear it if you're very still, the low murmur that connects every living thing. It is the sound of the world remembering itself. And as this long night lifts, we remember too, not who we were, who we are. Twilight returns. The last light of the sun glides across the ocean, turns gold, then violet, then fades. Night rises again, not as darkness, but as a vast mirror, where every star is an ancient eye, watching, remembering. For thousands of years, people have stood at this same edge. Caral's astronomers, the builders of Teotihuacan, the watchers of Chaco Canyon, each gazing into the same horizon, each wondering if the glow beyond the waves is an ending or a beginning. Perhaps it is always both. The sea sighs. The sand cools. Above, constellations drift into place. Orion, the Pleiades, the path of Venus. Once entire calendars were born from this sky. Now, our satellites trace the same patterns in silence, blinking like mechanical stars. Time circles back on itself. The past and future overlap like two waves meeting in the tide. Every civilization has left its reflection in this water. Some built with stone, others with song, some vanished in fire, others in silence. Yet all shared one belief, that nothing truly ends. What falls returns in another form. What sinks beneath the waves rises again in light. Maybe that is the secret the ocean has kept since Atlantis. Not tragedy, but renewal. When worlds drown, their dreams drift downward and become coral, feeding the next creation. Every collapse is a seed. Listen, the tide pulls, steady as a heartbeat. Between the pulses, a voice almost speaks, not in words, but in rhythm. The same rhythm that beat through drums in ancient plazas, through flutes of bone and shell, through the hidden frequencies of temples. It whispers the oldest promise, remember, and you will rise again. Far inland, the desert sleeps beneath stars that never blink. There, among dunes, a new city waits to be born, not of empire, but of balance. Architects study the wind, shape buildings that breathe. Engineers listen to rivers and design machines that sing in harmony with their flow. Farmers trace spirals in their fields, planting by the same solstice the ancients once watched. The pattern returns. Quietly, the future begins to hum. The sea is quiet now. The wind has faded. Only the slow sound of water remains, the eternal whisper that has carried every story ever told. If you listen closely, it sounds almost like breathing, not the breathing of a person or even of the planet, but of something greater, the pulse of time itself. Every tide, every dawn, every heartbeat echoes that rhythm. It is the sound the ancients heard when they stood beneath the stars. It is the same sound that drifts through your window tonight, carrying memories older than language. The world does not forget. It only waits for us to listen again. When we dig into the soil and find stone foundations, when we scan the jungle and discover lost roads, when we gaze at the constellations and feel an ache we cannot name that is the earth, remembering itself through us. We are not just the descendants of those forgotten civilizations. We are their continuation, their unfinished thought, their final breath turned into ours. History moves like the tide, gentle, patient, returning in waves. It takes from us, and it gives back, reshapes. Each generation thinks it is the first to awaken. Yet every awakening is simply the next beat in the same ancient song. Our ancestors built with stone and shadow. We build with light and data, but both are made from the same substance, imagination. The same spark that carved pyramids now writes code. The same wonder that mapped the stars now maps the human mind. Perhaps that is how creation works. Not as an endless ascent, but as a spiral, each turn higher, each cycle familiar. The gods of old were not rulers. They were reminders, reflections of what we might become again. If the ocean still holds the ruins of lost worlds, it also holds their dreams. And when the waves break against the shore, perhaps those dreams wash up, quiet as shells, waiting for someone to pick them up and listen. Maybe that someone is you. So tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine the sound of those waves reaching through time, touching Caral, Tiwanaku, Chaco, Cahokia, the cities of the Amazon, and the coasts now drowned in memory. Imagine their lights flickering once more beneath the stars, each a spark of what we once were, each a whisper of what we could be again. They say the universe is expanding, a slow breath outward into infinity, but maybe, at its heart, it is also remembering, folding inward, breathing us back home. Every galaxy, every world, every mind is part of that rhythm, rising and falling with the same cosmic tide. We are the witnesses. We are the storytellers. We are the dreamers that time uses to speak to itself. And perhaps that is why stories like this one matter. Because they remind us that the unknown is not something to fear, but something to feel. That the past is not gone, only waiting. That the silence beneath history still hums with life. The stars above you tonight are ancient light, traveling for billions of years to reach your eyes. They shine through layers of history, through the ruins of cities and the dust of forgotten suns, through oceans that swallowed empires, through the endless sleep of time. And still, they arrive. Still, they burn. The same light that guided the first sailors, the same glow that shone upon the builders of stone, the same quiet promise that once rose above Atlantis. It shines now upon you, a reminder that you too are part of the pattern, a note in the eternal melody of creation. So let the world fall quiet, let the stories drift into the dark, and let yourself rest inside that rhythm, the hum beneath all things, the breath that never ends. Because history never truly sleeps. It dreams, and through those dreams, it finds its way back to the surface. Maybe one day, when another civilization looks for us, they will find echoes, a digital signal humming faintly through time, a voice telling stories to the dark, a record of how we once tried to remember. They will listen, and they will understand, and the tide will turn again. Until then, listen, breathe, and remember, the sea is not only where stories end, it is where they begin again. The waves move, the stars pulse, the world dreams, and the story continues. And in that hum, something awakens inside us. We begin to sense that the myths were never about distant gods, but about us learning to see ourselves in everything. The story of lost civilizations is not a warning. It is a mirror, They rose when they lived in rhythm, and fell when they forgot. Their ruins remind us how to remember. Even now, deep beneath modern noise, there is a sound older than speech, the resonance between our heartbeat and the turning of the earth. It is the sound of belonging. Imagine standing once more at the shore, barefoot on cool sand. The wind carries the scent of salt and distance. You close your eyes. Behind your eyelids, constellations turn like slow gears. The waves roll in, each one a breath from an age before memory. You realize you are not watching history. You are inside it. The stars above you are the same stars that guided the builders of pyramids, the same that reflected in the flooded plazas of vanished cities. You have never been separate from them. The universe keeps time through you. Every thought, every kindness, every silence adds a note to the same unending song. The ancients played their part in stone. Ours is played in light. When enough hearts beat in harmony, the melody changes, and the world with it. So when the next dawn comes, remember the lesson carved beneath oceans and deserts alike, that creation is a cycle, not a race. That the measure of a civilization is not how long it lasts, but how deeply it listens. That knowledge without reverence is noise, and silence without wonder is sleep. We stand now where they once stood, at the threshold of remembering. The horizon glows again, gold at the edges, blue at the core. The sea breathes in, the stars tremble. Somewhere beyond the light, another age waits to be born. The ocean will rise, the continents will shift. Our cities will one day fade into sand, but the rhythm will remain. It will hum through coral reefs, whisper through the wind, echo in the dreams of whatever comes next. And when those future beings look up at the same sky, they will feel it too, that ancient pull toward the mystery that never ends. History is not a line, it is a tide. It advances, recedes and returns, carrying fragments of forgotten worlds with it. And tonight, as you drift towards sleep, that tide moves through you. You are part of it, a note in its endless song. So rest now, let the ocean speak, let the stars keep watch. The world is still writing itself, one breath, one wave, one heartbeat at a time. Because the past is not gone. It is waiting, and it remembers your name.